Center was basically out of commission for 3 months in the summer of 1989, which is about the most stupid thing you can do when your country is in a major crisis. First he had vacation, then he had gallbladder surgery, and he came back for a few days, had a couple of meetings, and then he reconvalesced further because he was keying on the 40th anniversary celebration and not on the crisis that was happening. And if the party doesn't have sort of the leadership, then it doesn't react vigorously. Now, mobilization doesn't happen by itself because dissidents had before been doing candlelight vigils with 50 people and so on. And 50 people are a feast day for the local Stasi because they're just enough of you so that you have fun and you don't feel sorry for beating them up and locking them up and harassing them and checking their identity and doing all the other nasty kinds of things that boys will do when they have uniforms and power and they're entitled by the state to lean on some people. So the dissidents who had the courage to resist and to develop alternative plans are crucial as incipient leaders of opposition. And one of those is the Berlin Umweltbibliothek that was in the basement of one of the churches. And indeed it is a library because, somewhere you had to be able to read Silent Spring, other tracts on, and the Club of Rome, predictions of whatever, kind of lit, environmentalist fires. And of course, it is also people, you have to sort of look at the dude, who's standing there, Rübenklau. It's also about style, of being unangepasst, you get somebody like that as a recruit of the NVA, either the recruit wouldn't survive or the NVA wouldn't survive. Because this is somebody who's opted out of the system, who is no longer manipulated by being told you can't advance in your profession and stuff like this. This is somebody who is in fundamental opposition. And without that courage, nothing would have happened. So there has to be a core. Secondly, I think the media history of 1989 is vastly understood. That is, under-analyzed and so on, because there were no free media in East Germany. The Western media, after sort of quasi-recognition, were in the East, and of course Western television was available. And towards the end of the GDR, they even put a cable system into Dresden, so that Western channels were in Dresden, which was formerly known as the Valley of the Clueless, because Western towers couldn't reach there. And the Western journalists reported this, and of course when people came out on the Austrian side and then arrived in Bavaria, they were immediately given passports, and this is what they're doing here. They're showing the new West German passports, because West Germany maintained that these folks were still Germans and therefore they should have immediate access to citizenship. Okay? Which is a kind of destabilizing policy, and it's a welcome policy because not only did they get passports, they also got housing help, they got help finding jobs, and so on. There was all sorts of stuff that made it easier to go from one part. And if you look at the ages of these folks here, 25 to 35, maybe 40, and so on, these are young, these are dynamic, these are some of the best. This is the future of the GDR that's leading. And without Western television pictures, who would have known? It wasn't in the Neue Deutschland. Only they eventually printed a story about a waiter on a long-distance train who was supposed to have been drugged and dragged into the West, and then treated badly. And about 10 days later, the Neue Deutschland had to recant and had to admit that they had all made it up. Because why would the West have to drug a waiter on a train? If tens of thousands of people were streaming across the border, on their own. Okay. But it shows you the propaganda warfare over the media. And the point is that these pictures are very emotional. They are not pictures that go to your head. They went at least, somewhere. I'm not sure if it's the heart or if it's somewhat further down, to your belly, to your gut, or whatever. But it's a sort of immediate emotional sort of visceral response is what I'm trying to say, okay? And that, of course, is also part of the process, because, it creates sympathy, who can be against that, even if that costs money and it has, bad consequences, and you have, relatives that you don't really want to recognize. Women in dowdy dresses and men in plastic suits and so on, that wouldn't be one of the rest for the last 15 or 20 years. Now, another aspect of this mobilization, of course, is the question of overcoming individual fear. And I think for that, demonstration experience is crucial because you are suppressible as long as you're alone. Because if you're alone against the 500,000 armed forces, People's Army, People's Police, Stasi, and factory militias. Okay, the GDR had 4 different kinds of various armed organs and so on. Then you feel powerless, okay, and you're not going to do anything. You're just going to pull your head in. But once you're out in public space and you see that other people are joining you, you get a sense of solidarity. This is what the traditional labor movement used to do. Only here they are semi-spontaneous. And this is of course the Alexanderplatz one on the 4th of November. There's potentially 500,000 people. It's more complicated because it was still partly organized by the party. We can talk about it. But the psychological response is the same, that when you're together with another 10,000 people or so, then you are at a point where you're no longer afraid. And when you're no longer afraid, you speak out, you shout, you point, paint posters and stuff, and you demand your rights. And finally, of course, it also has to do with the party again. And this is a dimension that is often under-analyzed in the literature and also in the anniversary stuff and so on, because the communists are kind of stooges and dupes and they're not really in the story. That's stupid from a historical point of view, because they still have power. And whatever they decide is what's going to go or not go. And of course, on the 18th of October, Honecker is finally kicked out and Krenz becomes his successor, and he announces a policy of controlled dialogue, except in his first television address, the first 2 words cost him his job. Are fundamentally wrong. Does anybody know what the first 2 words were? He said, "Dear comrades." Now, why was "Dear comrades" wrong? Because this was a speech which he had prepared for the party, for the Central Committee, and he was treating the population of the GDR as if they were all communists, and they're just trying to get out from under. If he had said, "Dear citizens of the GDR," maybe the Wende would have had a bit more of a chance. Okay, I'm just dramatizing it, but the point is that Krenz has no credibility. Okay, now, this is the sort of first bunch of stuff that I wanted to talk about. Causes, structural causes, short-term events, and mobilization process, all interacting and creating a kind of process of what? Of contention. That's the new, one of the new social science words for this, for civil unrest. That's former is McAdam, the other one is Timothy Garden Ash, and so on. In old-fashioned historical lingo, it's a popular uprising. That happens. The interesting thing is, of course, that the first demand in a dictatorship is for human rights, or for civil rights. Why? Because you need those in order to do anything else. This is the most basic thing. Okay? Because if you want to improve the economy, or you want to travel, you want to change the policies of the government, you have to be able to ask for it in public. You have to be able to dramatize. Okay? And that, of course, is the reason for the slogan, "We are the people," in contrast to "you, the armed forces," or the police, or the government, or whatever. Do you understand that? And that's, of course, a quote from any number of different things, including the United States Constitution, and so on. And it has to do with the German word Volk, which, and this most people don't know, in the first half of the 19th century was a left word, which the radical Democrats and then the socialists used before the radical right, the folkish people, and the racist and the anti-Semites stole it, and then it became the Volksgemeinschaft of the Nazis and stuff like this. But The East Germans tried to take it back with the